CBS Sports.
And first pitch crushing. Deep left field. This is way back. Walk 'em off.
Got a fantasy question? Email fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. Get ready to win your league.
Where fantasy becomes reality.
Now here's Frank, Scott, and Chris.
Sleepers, breakouts, and BUSTS 3.0. Let's do it. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Monday, March 28th. Frank Stampfl joined by Scott White, and it's our last full week of pods before opening day next week. Get hyped. I was going to lead with Charlie Morton, Scott, because, come on, the guy was awesome in his spring debut, but I kind of feel like we should just talk about Will Smith smacking Chris Rock.
That's all I can think about right now. Like, it just happened as we're recording now, or like within the last hour, it just happened. So yeah, it's difficult to recompose yourself after that that one of the greatest moments in live TV history, I think, is fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for us to recompose ourselves. Imagine being Chris Rock. I mean, you guys on TV, he just got smacked. So if anyone hasn't seen it by now, go. If you're on Twitter, if you're anywhere right now, you'll probably see a video of it, and it's one of the craziest things that I've ever seen. Anyway, Scott, Charlie Morton, I did want to just kind of lead with this. He looked awesome in his spring debut. It's great to see 4 2/3 hitless innings, 5 strikeouts to just 1 walk. You love to see it, Scotty.
You love to see it. I never had any doubts, Frank.
No doubts. That's exactly right. And we both have a bunch of shares of Charlie Morton and excited about it. Very excited. So he looks ready to go, mid-season form. Fantastic.
I haven't been getting as many shares lately because it seems like maybe the world has caught up to us. Or at least maybe not all the way, because I have him as a top 15 starting pitcher, but he's not going at quite the same discount he once was.
It's true. It is true. All right, let's get to our latest sleepers, breakouts, and busts. Plus, I have some news and weekend performances I want to get to outside of Charlie Morton, of course. And Scott, let's start with some sleepers. You're up first. What you got?
All right, sleepers. Another guy whose stock has been rising, but I don't think as quickly as Morton's. I still think I can call him a sleeper, and that's Justin Verlander. I want all the Justin Verlander I can handle because I think, and it's easier to say this now, having seen him throw in spring training a couple times, I think he's still Justin Verlander. There are always some doubts for a pitcher coming back from Tommy John surgery, and in this case, a 39-year-old coming back from Tommy John surgery is one thing to average average mid-90s on your fastball, hit 98 with some regularity when you're 36, but now we're asking him to do it at 39. Well, it seems like he still has that kind of stuff, and he's always been such a workhorse, and I think especially since it's clear he's in, I'm not saying, I don't know that this is the last year of his career, but it's clear he's in the last years of his career. I doubt neither he nor the Astros are going to be interested in preserving his workload the way you would normally see a pitcher fresh off Tommy John surgery. So, last time we saw him, he had one of the great pitching seasons in modern history. Over 300 strikeouts, 21 wins. The whip was .80, I think. It was amazing. And that was the last time we saw him. So, I don't know that he's going to be quite that good again, but anything close to that, and he's going to be well worth his ADP.
And where is he going in ADP right now? Fantasy Pros, 100.2 is the average draft position for Justin Verlander. Like Charlie Morton, he's someone who is beginning to climb throughout spring training because he looks healthy. He's throwing mid-90s with the fastball again. And in the offseason, signed a 1-year, $25 million deal to return to the Houston Astros. And that comes with a conditional option where if he reaches 130 innings, he'll get an additional year at $25 million. So you know that he's obviously got that as a goal, the 130. And then, if we can, I think I feel pretty good that he's going to get there. And anything after that, can we get, up to 160, 180, something like that from Verlander? I think that would be awesome. Scott, speaking of Verlander, going just ahead of him in this range, would you rather have Verlander or Carlos Rodon, who signed with the Giants, obviously?
I'd rather have Verlander, but yeah, very encouraged by what we've seen from Carlos Rodon this spring too. I think he's just made one start, right? But he was hitting 98 in it. So clearly the dip in velocity from last September wasn't carrying over, and that's a big deal. So I believe they're consecutive in my rankings now, but Verlander's ahead because of even coming back from Tommy John surgery. I suspect the workload will be better for Verlander.
Right. What about Verlander versus some, hype guys around the industry? Trevor Rogers, Alek Manoah, Dylan Cease.
Yeah, they're all behind those two.
All right. So yeah, Verlander, if you're using Scott's rankings, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to wind up with him on your fantasy team. Scott, a sleeper for me, and someone I just wanted to talk about once again because of what he did on Sunday. And I don't want to overreact too much to spring training, but Jesus Luzardo, another impressive outing from Luzardo on Sunday, going up against the Houston Astros lineup, which was basically filled with their starters minus Yordan Alvarez. He went 4 innings of 1-run ball, 5 strikeouts to just 1 walk. The sinker velo was up 2 miles per hour compared to where he was at last year. The 4-seam was up about 1.4 miles per hour, and he threw his curveball a ton. He got 8 of his 10 swinging strikes on Sunday with that curveball. It was a weird season for Luzardo last year, Scott. One where he broke his pinky playing video games, like slammed his hand down. So it was just a weird season, traded over to the Marlins. But man, he knew what he needed to work on this offseason. And so far, it's hard not to be excited about Jesus Luzardo and what he's done in spring training.
Yeah, I agree. I'm getting pretty hyped about Jesus. I was not as gung-ho about him early on before we started seeing the way he looked this spring. But even like the velocity gain on its own would be enough to open a new world of possibilities. But then you factor in that certainly in the second spring start, it wasn't so much the case in the first one, but certainly in the second one, he was leaning on his secondaries more, which are some of the changes we were hoping to make because they're so good. They're so good that it was the fastball that's held him back to this point in his career. So now maybe the fastball won't hold him back, first of all. And yeah, he's leaning on his best pitches all the more. And yeah, I think I'm going to come out with Sleepers 3.0 this week. Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts 3.0 this week. And I suspect Luzardo will be in either the Sleepers or the Breakouts for me. He could kind of fit into either category, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. The ADP for Jesus Luzardo, 304, someone who has also been on the rise, rightfully so. And you can get him late in your drafts. I mean, one of your last picks, honestly. Again, that is Jesus Luzardo. Scott, would you rather have Luzardo or another sleeper you have on this list, Carlos Carrasco?
Well, I'd rather have, but I'd prioritize whichever one I need to take first in order to get both. But that's not the question you asked me. I would prefer to have Carlos Carrasco. Do you want me to get into my sleeper case for him?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. So Carlos Carrasco, I've made the case before that, okay, he was not good last year, obviously, but he was sidetracked by the hamstring injury for the first 4 months, right? Hurried build up. Didn't seem to have the same bite on his slider, but the velocity seemed fine. It didn't seem like an age-related decline. Maybe just, he wasn't quite right for whatever reason because of the long layoff. Well, we have more of a reason now. It's been revealed early in spring training that he had loose bodies, or at least a bone spur, at least one loose body, or maybe several, in his pitching elbow during that stretch. And he couldn't fully extend his elbow. Seems like one of those basic things you should be able to do to pitch at a major league level, and he wasn't able to do it. And he's had surgery since then to remove that loose bodies, and now his elbow feels great, he says, and his velocity has been up higher than it normally is for this time in the spring. I know the results haven't been good, but that doesn't matter nearly as much to me as how he's feeling, given the track record that he has.
Yeah, he was quoted recently saying it's completely different from last year, referring to his elbow. So yeah, just full off season of being healthy for Carlos Carrasco. And just a couple of years ago, 2020, it was only 12 starts, but he was a top 30 starting pitcher that year. So I mean, we're really not far removed
Yeah.
from
Well,
a very productive pitcher in Carrasco.
Yeah, like I said, the track record, you look at basically for the better part of the last decade, right? There was last year where he had the elbow thing going on in addition to the hamstring. And there was 2019, which was the year when he was diagnosed with leukemia and had to shut it down then. So clearly wasn't healthy then, but otherwise you go back to 2013, the last time he had a season where on a per start basis he was anything less than high end. So, dating back to, let's see, I could give you the numbers dating back to 2014, even with those two not very good partial seasons mixed in, a 3.54 ERA, 113 whip, and 10.1 K per nine. That's a great track record. And because 2 of the last 3 years have gone the way they have for Carrasco, I think people are forgetting just how consistent he used to be.
Yeah, and you don't need him to be that too, where you're getting him. His ADP is 272.2. We'd love for that to be the case. If it turns out, Carrasco's healthy and he pitches to that level again, we'd love it. That's part of the reason why he's a sleeper here. But again, I mean, you just draft him as late as he's going and you hope for the best there. And same thing being said, Scott, for Alex Cobb, someone I feel like we're all collectively excited about joining the San Francisco Giants. They've done great work with starting pitchers the past couple of seasons, getting the most out of someone like Kevin Gausman, who relies very heavily on the splitter. Same thing for Alex Cobb. And Cobb was actually pretty good last year too. 3.76 ERA, 98 strikeouts, over 93 and a third innings pitched. Gets a good amount of ground balls, 53% last season. He had a career high in terms of his swinging strike rate. So there's a lot to like. He's got to stay on the field. He's someone who also deals with quite a bit of injuries, but great ballpark to pitch in, great organization to pitch for, should have a ton of run support with the San Francisco Giants. Scott, how would you rank those three, Cobb, Luzardo, and Carlos Carrasco?
I like them all. I do perceive Cobb to have the least upside of the three.
Okay.
I'm hoping the Giants can turn out like an Anthony Desclafani stat line for him, which would be great, but it wouldn't be quite the upside that I imagine the other two having. So I go Carrasco, Luzardo, and Cobb third.
Okay. And for all three of these pitchers, do you want them as one of your starters, let's say in a head-to-head points league where you start 5 pitchers, or do you want them more as bench options?
Oh, bench options.
Okay.
Bench
yeah,
options.
I agree with
that. I mean, look, they could emerge as starters.
Yeah.
This is the range of pitchers where last year, we were talking about like Trevor Rogers and Carlos Rodon, Logan Webb. I think Robbie Ray was in that group. Like those were the four big. Those were the four pitchers who were making a splash last spring, and if you drafted early, you were picking them up off the waiver wire, and obviously they all turned out to be major finds in fantasy. Oh, Freddie Peralta was part of that group too. It's funny. I was looking at, because heading into the weekend, I wrote my deep sleepers piece. I have 30 deep sleepers, all drafted more or less outside the top 300. And I was looking back at last year's version of that article, and all 5 of those pitchers were in it.
Nice.
In addition to like Joey Votto and Tyler Oneil, more hits than you'd expect for a deep sleepers piece. So I was pretty happy to see that. But yeah, it's just funny to put your mind in that place exactly a year ago, and imagine those pitchers being valued at the level like a Jesus Luzardo or Carlos Carrasco is now.
Yep, for sure. All right, Scott, I know you have a few slugging hitters here that you want to get to, a first baseman and a catcher. Who are those sleepers?
All right. So Luke Voit is the first baseman. And I mean, can you look up the latest ADP since the trade, which was...
Yeah, so I'm looking at the past week, NFBC ADP, and for Luke Voit, it's 217.66.
Still outside.
Round 18 of a 12-team league. Yep.
Still outside the top 200. That's amazing. So clearly, I mean, look, that NFBC is just one source, and obviously ADP can vary from site to site. And I think NFBC draft rooms are ordered by ADP, or aren't they? Anyway, there's a lot of smart people participating in NFBC, so it really does. I really don't understand. I mean, before, when he was going outside the top 200, you could make the case, okay, well, he's still with the Yankees, and we think the Yankees want to make a change at first base. So what's Voigt's role going to be? And we presume that was the reason he was going so late. But then he got traded to the Padres, where he's going to be an everyday player. And if that's the case, it really doesn't make any sense. During his entire stint with the Yankees, he hit 271 with a 901 OPS and homered more often, as in on a per plate appearance basis, more often than Matt Olson during that time. So top 5 potential among first basemen. I think he deserves to go 80 to 100 picks earlier than he's going.
1,000%. I'm with you, Scott. I don't understand what people are looking at here when it comes to Luke Voit. He's got to stay on the field. He's another one. He's dealt with a bunch of injuries last year, a torn meniscus in his left knee, strained right oblique. He's also had some foot issues that he's played with. But when he's been on the field, Scott, you highlighted just how good Luke Voit was with the Yankees, and now likely to be the everyday DH for the San Diego Padres. He actually crushed his first home run of spring training over the weekend as well. So Scott has Luke Voit 132nd overall in his rankings. I have him 137th. Who is that catcher? I know you have a slugging catcher you like as well.
Yep, Mitch Garver. Mitch Garver, who had a 2-homer game over the weekend, I believe. So all the sleepers stepping up in spring, except for Carlos Carrasco, I guess. But that's fine. That's fine. He's healthy. That's the important thing. Yeah, Mitch Garver. Yeah, he's going to play more with the Rangers. That's the bottom line. Like, he should have played more with the Twins, and obviously injuries prevented that from happening to some degree. But even when he was healthy last year, it seemed like he was splitting at bats 50-50 with Ryan Jeffers. For reasons I don't understand. I guess they wanted to develop Jeffers, but I mean, it's not like Mitch Garver is bad defensively. His pitch frame rating is, I think it's like 93rd percentile. Or it was last year, according to StatCast. So I think the Rangers appreciate that. They have a greater appreciation for what Garver could do than maybe the Twins did. And at the plate, there really shouldn't be much question what he could do. The only catchers who had a higher OPS than Garver last year were Yasmani Grandal, who of course walks a ton, and Buster Posey, who's retired now. So yeah, he had a better OPS than Salvador Perez with all those home runs he hit. And was even better, Garver was, in 2019. 31 home runs in only 93 games, and 995 OPS that year. And I should point out, like, he was one of those players, Garver was, who got off to a miserable start last April when offensive numbers were down across the league. From April 28th on, Garver had a 991 OPS. So he was basically as good as he was in 2019, just without the playing time.
Yeah, look, Garver, he's been awesome when he's on the field. He's another one. Has to stay healthy, but he crushes the ball. Lots of fly balls, strong average exit velocity, a 17.4% barrel rate last year for Mitch Garver. That was second to only Mike Zunino at the catcher position. It was better than Salvador Perez. I mean, that's just how good on a per plate appearance basis that Mitch Garver was last season. Scott, would you rather have Mitch Garver or I think this one's an easy one, but for ADP's sake, Tyler Stevenson?
Yeah, definitely Garver.
How about Garver versus Gilbert Ruiz, who's still going about 33 picks ahead of Mitch Garver?
So I think I kept Gilbert Ruiz ahead in points leagues because the strikeout rate is so low. And that obviously gives him a big advantage in that scoring format. But I think I'm talking myself out of that. I'm really excited about what Garver can do with the team that genuinely wants to play him every day, to the point that I think he'll spend a lot of time at DH when he needs a day off, because who else, it's not like they have a lot of viable DH options. Willie Calhoun, I guess, is expected to get most of the starts there. But Garver could get some of them.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking at the rankings here. You have Mitch Garver 7th in Roto and 8th in head-to-head points, but you can make that swap. I've already made it too. Yeah, I put Mitch Garver ahead of Keibert Ruiz. As much as I like Ruiz, I think there's a lot of potential and upside there.
I mean, basically the way I'm approaching catcher is if I can get Salvador Perez in the back half of round 3 or later, then absolutely I do it. Otherwise, I'll wait. The next one I'll look at is Dalton Varsho, who projects to be the full-time center fielder for the Diamondbacks. And so, getting full-time at bats as a catcher eligible player, that gives Varsho a lot, an easy path to fantasy relevance, in addition to the fact that he can steal bases. So I look to Dalton Varsho next in round 10 or 11. I want to kind of get him at a little bit of a discount. And if it doesn't work out, then I look to Garver a couple rounds later. And if that doesn't work out, I basically just take the best of whatever's left at the end.
All right. One more sleeper for me, Connor Joe. You know the deal by now. You listen to Kokomo Friday. I love Connor Joe. Scott loves Connor Joe as well. 29-year-old journeyman who burst onto the scene last year with the Rockies. He had 285, 8 homers, 35 RBI in his small sample with the team. Fantastic plate discipline, 12% walk rate, 19% strikeout rate, lots of line drives, going to play very well in Coors Field. And he was leading off against both left-handed and right-handed pitching in the second half of the season. He led off every game from August 8th through September 3rd. And so far in the spring, he's just picked up exactly where he left off. Let's see. I have the numbers here. In 19 at-bats, he has 10 hits, 2 doubles, a home run, a steal, a 1380 OPS. So you don't want to care too much about spring training, but, seeing an older player like Connor Joe kind of emerge last year, you do want to see him kind of pick up where he left off. And that's exactly what he's done thus far. And He is going very, very late in drafts. The ADP for Connor Joe is, it's really low. Let's see here. On Fantasy Pros, 348. So if you play in a 5 outfielder league, he's someone that you could even get on your bench. So you don't even have to have him as a starter. Why not take a chance on the potential leadoff man for the Rockies?
Yeah, I included him in that deep sleepers column because he's going as late as you said he was, Frank. Almost going too late to be included in the regular sleepers column because I also have a deep sleepers column I have to fill. But I think there has been some question about playing time for him. And I talked about how the Randall Grichuk trade, I think, gave him a clearer path to playing time because now the Rockies can put they get Tapia out of the way, who Tapia was only a corner outfielder himself, and they could put a bat they like in center field in Randall Grichuk, and that still leaves a corner spot. It sounds like it's going to be Charlie Blackmon in the corner spot more in right field, and Connor Joe as the primary DH, though, of course, getting some occasional starts in the outfield himself. But every team's beat writer that's employed by MLB, so, for all the official team sites, the beat writer for each, they all this weekend published an article predicting the team that they cover's opening day roster. And Thomas Harding for the Rockies, he predicted Connor Joe in the DH spot, basically playing every day. And I think that makes sense. I mean, obviously, you talked about how productive he was last season, how good he is at getting on base, and how he's continued it this spring. And I don't think there should be too many doubts about his playing time. If that's what's preventing you from drafting Connor Joe, knock it off.
I agree. Yeah, let's go. Let's do this. Let's get Connor Joe in there. Scott, talk to me about one of the top prospects in baseball in Julio Rodriguez and why you're so excited about him.
I think he's going to make the team. And the version of that article for the Mariners by the Mariners beat writer thinks he's going to make the team too. They've played him most every game. He started at center field for the Mariners this spring, and Scott Service is already on the record saying he thinks he's their best defensive option in center field. Jerry Dipoto, the GM of the Mariners, has said he thinks he's ready for the big stage. I mean, what more do you need to hear? Like they're all dropping some pretty big hints there, and you could certainly see him fitting into the lineup. They moved Jared Kelenic to left field where they're more comfortable playing him. They put Jesse Winker at DH, at least most of the time. I read actually that he's also been taking some grounders at first base recently.
Yep.
To create another potential path for at bats, possibly in anticipation of Julio Rodriguez being there. So, it didn't seem like going into spring training anybody was giving him a real chance. He's played, I think, 42 games above A ball, but he hit 362 in those 42 games. Oof. And he's just like, he's the caliber of prospect that you expect to skip AAA, honestly. Like, the only reason he won it is because the team wants to delay his timetable for service time monetary reasons, and the Mariners are not in a position to do that. They're trying to win. They're the team that's been held out of the playoffs for the longest. They came very close last year. They just gave Robbie Ray a big contract. If Julio Rodriguez is ready, I think they should let him on the team, and it seems like they think that too.
All right, the ADP for Julio Rodriguez is 262.6. Scott, would you rather have him or Enrique Hernandez, who's actually going 20 spots higher?
Come on, Frank.
Hey, I'm just asking what the ADP is showing, Scott. So don't blame me.
You asked for my favorite 5 sleepers, and I was debating which one to put as my 5th. But just from my own experience, I know that Julio Rodriguez is one of those players I'm very disappointed every time I don't get him. So I think that's my heart speaking for me, that he is one of my favorites. And absolutely, I would take him over Enrique Hernandez or any other low ceiling player that goes in that range.
All right. How about Julio versus someone we'll talk about in just a little bit, Joe Adell?
So I think I have to go Adell because we know he has the job, and of course he has a ton of upside. He's having a big spring, one of the biggest springs of anybody, frankly. I do trust the talent a little more with Julio Rodriguez, though. Like I think it's a safer bet if Julio Rodriguez is in the lineup that he's going to put up fantasy relevant numbers, though Adell absolutely could too. So I lean Adell there, but it's close. It's also an interesting, and I don't know how they relate in terms of ADP, but Julio Rodriguez versus Riley Green versus Spencer Torkelson. Torkelson obviously isn't an outfielder, but another player who hasn't debuted in the majors yet. And it's looking even more likely Torkelson and Green make the Tigers roster than that Rodriguez makes the Mariners roster. I don't think they're both top 5 prospects in their own right, but I just don't think any prospect is at Rodriguez's level in terms of talent. So if I knew for sure Rodriguez was going to be on the major league roster, he'd be the highest of any of them. But since I don't, I think I put him at the back of that group, but only slightly. And partly it's because I'm pretty confident I won't have to take Rodriguez until all 3 of those, Adell, Torkelson, and Riley Green, are gone.
So Julio's actually going ahead of Riley Green right now. So the ADP shows Torkelson at 231. Joe Adell, just throw him in this mix because we were talking about him and he's a prospect, 232. And then Julio, I mentioned, was at 262, and Riley Green was right around pick 300. So
is that over the last week, or is that overall?
That's just overall Fantasy Pros ADP. So the entire.
I wonder if it's changed recently, because it didn't seem like there was as much traction for Riley Green making the team as there was Torkelson at first.
Mm-hmm. So over the past,
go ahead.
Over the past week, Torkelson is 246. Riley Green is 257. Julio Rodriguez is 244. So they're all kind of going in the same.
They're all bunched. Yeah.
And then Joe Adell just he's going ahead of those guys, 214.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, I guess give me Julio Rodriguez over Riley Green then.
All right. Before we get to the news and notes, Rachel Jones is leading our March Madness FBT bracket. If she holds on, she will earn a $100 gift card to Paramount Plus and get to join our For the People Listener League. And speaking of which, we are still taking your submissions again. The FBT podcast leagues will be, one of them will be this week. The 12-team head-to-head points league draft will be this Wednesday, March 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And the For the People League, a 16-team head-to-head categories league, will be drafted the following Tuesday, April 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So if you want an opportunity to join one of these leagues, send us something creative, a song, create a fun Photoshop. We've been receiving awesome tweets and emails so far. So we do appreciate all of those. You can create a t-shirt design, poem, haiku, or just tell us why you deserve to be in the league. Email those submissions to fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. Put FBT Listener League in the subject line, and I will let you know by tomorrow. I will have the announcement for the head-to-head points league because obviously the draft is the following day. So be on the lookout. Send those in. I'm going to choose those tomorrow, and I will announce that. And one final thing, we're closing in on 10,000 YouTube subscribers. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed to this point. If you are watching this and you haven't subscribed, please help us out. And once we hit 10K, we're going to do a giveaway for a free FBT hoodie. So more details to come about that. Nice little milestone there. 10K YouTube subscribers. So very excited about that as well. We're going to hit a quick break. And when we return, some news and notes from the weekend here on Fantasy Baseball Today. All right, so Zach Wheeler pitched a simulated inning against 2 hitters on Saturday. He also said that he, quote, hasn't felt a trace of soreness in his right shoulder and hopes to be ready for the start of the season. So, Scott, good news all along. I know that you've been drafting Zach Wheeler in like that 3rd round range, and it's looking pretty good right now.
Yeah, I got him discounted in a few leagues. Feeling good about it.
All right. Shohei Ohtani was scratched from his pitching start on Saturday, but he will start this upcoming Thursday. Joe Madden said Ohtani was not scratched because of injury or fatigue, but they didn't really give a reason as to why. So thought it was interesting. Something to pay attention to, but Ohtani hit a home run over the weekend as well. Looks healthy. Everything seems to be good there. Every ballpark, Scott, this kind of came out of nowhere. Every ballpark will have a humidor this season. And I know a couple of years ago, I wasn't with you guys yet, but it was like a pretty big deal. Anytime, a ballpark would get a humidor. I remember Arizona was one that, really caused a lot of not controversy, but, we started like
consternation.
Yeah, consternation. That's a good word there. Saris tweeted that it won't be a big deal in most parks, this humidor, but the most humid parks, the Giants, the Padres, the Marlins, and the Tampa Bay Rays may get an offensive boost as the humidors will dry out the balls a little bit in those locations. So I don't know if you read anything else or if you have any takeaways about this, but the humidors, you have anything?
I reacted. I guess you could say I overreacted to the humidor being introduced in Arizona a few years ago, based on how it ultimately played out. The park hasn't. This is saying it could elevate offense in the most humid parks. Well, obviously Arizona is not humid. It's on the other end of the spectrum. So when you're bringing up the humidity of the ball relative to the air around it, that kills the ball. It doesn't make it travel better, like Saris is suspecting it will in the more humid parks. And look, since the introduction of the humidor, Arizona hasn't been as friendly a place to hit, but it didn't have the drastic effects on individual hitters that I thought it would, that I feared it would. And so I don't think any of the examples he gave are as extreme on the other end of the spectrum as Arizona is, So I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying I don't want to overreact to it. I'm not really thinking about changing anybody's spot in the rankings based on that.
All right.
Did you happen to see the other league news that came out this weekend?
Oh, that they're going to crack down on sticky substances again?
Even more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a hunch that would happen. And so basically they noticed, like we've talked about, that spin rates after the initial drop across the league in June, they went back up toward the end of the season. And they also suspect that pitchers must have figured out a way around the checks that umpires were doing. And so now they're going to check it even more thoroughly. They're going to check the hand itself as opposed to the glove and the main areas where pitchers would have hit it in the past. And they're good. A few other things they're going to check too. Basically, they're cracking down even harder.
Yep, definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah. Now, I was curious. Garrett Cole made his first spring start here on Sunday. The spin rates, as compared to last year, what he averaged for the whole year, wasn't a big difference. So are these new checks going to really address the problem? I don't know. I also happened to see, I was reading, it was just a throwaway line from the Yankees beat reporter on the Yankees official site. I forget what the article was even about, but there was a throwaway line in it where Aaron Boone said that pitchers are being offered 2 versions of a new tackier rosin this season to help with grip. So it looks like, yes, they want to prevent like spider tack and the foreign substances, but they're introducing like an alternative that's legal. That maybe means we don't see the drastic change in spin rate that we saw last summer. So again, it's one of those where like, yeah, it could have an effect, but it could not too. Do you want to turn your rankings upside down? My biggest takeaway about that is like the effect that the sticky substance ban had last year, I think was mainly on the high end. You saw them become a little less dominant and a little less consistent. And maybe there's a continued flattening in the pitcher ranks as a result of this. Not an extreme one, but a subtle one. I was already thinking hitter to start most drafts rounds 1 and 2, go hitter to the extent I can help it, of course, because you're at the mercy of what everyone else does. And I'm not going to pass up Garrett Cole 12th overall or whatever. But I think even more so, I'm thinking hitter to not invest so much in those high-end pitchers that I think could potentially suffer the most from this.
All right. Andrew Vaughn had to be carted off the field Sunday after making a diving catch in the outfield. He's been having a really strong spring, so something to watch there. But if he opens the season on the IL, could lead to even more playing time for your guy, Gavin Sheets. Zach Gallen is unlikely to be ready the first time through the rotation for the D-backs because of that shoulder injury that he's dealing with. Dylan Carlson is being considered as the Cardinals' leadoff hitter. It would certainly help Dylan Carlson's value, but could hurt Tommy Edman's value quite a bit as well. So I think the assumption was that Edman would lead off, and that could lead to more steals and runs scored, obviously. But if he's not, it obviously hurts. There were differing reports this weekend. I saw something about Dylan Floro with his hip, but I've also read arm soreness. Either way, Dylan Floro is dealing with something, Scott. And then I also saw differing reports about who can be the replacement if he has to open the season on the IL. So I saw one about Anthony Bender, who was very good last year, and then one about Anthony Bass, who wasn't as good but has a little bit more closing experience. So do you have a feel here if Floro can't go to start the season?
I mean, Bender is the one I'm moving up because of this. I think Don Mattingly, I also read, he said we may be one of those teams that doesn't have a set closer to begin the year, though given Mattingly's history, he quickly settles on a guy. Part of it is we don't know the severity of Floro's injury, the extent of the absence. If we're talking about, he shows up in week 2 for the Marlins, then maybe nothing happens. He still ends up being the closer, but he's not the caliber of pitcher that I think would push out Anthony Bender if Bender's getting the job done, So that was, I think Floro's a good enough pitcher to keep closing if he's getting the job done, but somebody else steps in and starts getting the job done instead. I think Mattingly would just stick with him. So I think I'm still drafting Floro ahead of Bender, but I was already drafting Floro higher than most people anyway. I'm moving Bender ahead of like the Tigers duo of Gregory Soto and Michael Fulmer, because I just don't think there's ever going to be any clarity with those two. And I'd rather take the shot on Bender taking the job and running with it personally. But yeah, as somebody with a lot of fluoro shares already, I'm concerned about this.
There was an article on The Athletic this weekend about John Gray and Dane Dunning changing their slider grip. So it's going to be more of a sweeping slider. So let's pay attention to that throughout spring training. Alex Reyes was placed on the 60-day injured list with that severe shoulder injury. Brandon Belt is dealing with knee inflammation. He's participating in full baseball workouts and will be reevaluated for spring training action within a week. If he can't go to start the season, that would help Darren Ruff, someone we also like. Nationals prospect Cade Cavalli allowed 3 runs on 5 hits over 3+ innings on Saturday. After the start, manager Dave Martinez didn't rule out the possibility of Cavalli being part of the opening day rotation for the Nationals. Martinez said, "I like it. Let's just say that. I like it. You know, he'll get another start down here in 5 days or pitch in another game, and then we'll see." Cavalli was the first-round pick in 2020, and last season, he had 175 strikeouts over 123 and a third innings pitched. Scott, any deep sleeper appeal for Cade Cavalli following this quote?
I mean, yeah, if you play in a large league, 15 teams or deeper, take a flyer on him with your last pick, see what happens. I'd be pretty surprised. His minor league track record, ton of strikeouts last year, but a lot of inconsistencies otherwise. I'm not questioning the talent. I'm just not sure why the Nationals would be in a position to rush him. I mean, even this last spring start, he gave up.
Yeah, he wasn't great.
Few earned runs, right?
Yeah. He made 6 starts at AAA last year, too. He had a 7.30 ERA. So I think he could use a little bit more seasoning down there. And speaking of pitching prospects, Roansy Contreras with the Pirates was optioned to AAA, so he will not be in the opening day rotation for them. Luis Patino is scheduled to throw a bullpen session Tuesday as he works through shoulder soreness. Oof, there are a lot of performances I wanted to mention here, Scott.
I just want to mention real quick, I would go Mackenzie Gore over Cade Cavalli, even if it's a long shot. Gore makes the roster. He had his second start was great. He's allowed 1 base runner, I believe, in 5 innings. And he looks like he's on track. So whenever he does come up, I imagine him staying.
All right, let me just quickly run through some of these performances, and then we'll get into breakouts and busts as well. Through 7 spring training games, Cody Bellinger has a 158 batting average and has 14 strikeouts in 19 at-bats. That was entering Sunday. So there was a report recently that he changed his batting stance again. I don't know what's going on. Like, originally, I was very excited about Cody Bellinger. I drafted him in my home league this weekend, but seeing something like this, it's just, what is going on with Cody Bellinger?
I mean, you don't want to overreact to a 20 at-bat stretch in spring training, but like, plate discipline is one of those things that normalizes pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And what's most concerning is throughout his struggles the past 2 years, strikeouts haven't really been the issue. So if he's having trouble just connecting now, he may be spiraling here. I'm not sure I'm going to touch Cody Bellinger unless his stock just plummets from where it already is.
I don't blame you, man. It is tough. It's one of the weirdest situations to figure out. Jacob deGrom made it through 3 innings of 1-run ball with 5 strikeouts on Sunday. He got his pitch count up to 52 and seemingly came away from the start healthy. Luis Severino allowed 3 runs with 4 walks over 1 2/3 innings on Friday, and his fastball velo was actually down compared to his first start. So he averaged right around 95 miles per hour. It was 97 in his first start. So kind of scared off Severino right now as well. Andrew Heaney gave up 5 more runs on Sunday. His spring ERA is up to 16.88. I mean, just get him out of here. Get Andrew Heaney out of here. Scott, I know that there's some optimism about your guy, Tony Gonsolin. We'll get to him in just a little bit. The Padres' 5th starter job, we mentioned Mackenzie Gore is pitching very well so far. Nick Martinez threw 3 innings of 1-run ball with 3 strikeouts on Friday. The 4th and 5th starter job for the Braves are up for grabs right now. And Tucker Davidson threw 3 perfect innings this weekend with 4 strikeouts. So a name to watch there. The Mariners' 5th starter job, Matt Brash, 3 perfect innings with 6 strikeouts on Sunday. Scott, I know you've raved about the slider, one of the best in the minor leagues last season. So these are deeper names, but I think they have some strikeout appeal. So Tucker Davidson, Matt Brash.
Especially. Brash I like. And there was a report over the weekend. It sounds like the Braves are leaning toward Huascar Ynoa and Kyle Wright for the last 2 spots, leaving Davidson out. Not totally decided yet, but Snitker mentioned that they were in the lead.
All right, Joe Ryan on Sunday against the Red Sox, 3 hitless innings with 5 strikeouts and just 1 walk. His fastball velo was up 1.5 miles compared to where it was last season. Tanner Rainey picked up 2 strikeouts on Saturday. Dave Martinez has mentioned he wants Tanner Rainey to win the closer job. His fastball velo, however, was down 4 miles per hour compared to where he was at last season. So that's pretty substantial for Tanner Rainey. Keston Hiura hit another home run on Saturday, his 3rd of the spring. Phillies prospect Bryson Stott started at third base on Sunday. He hit a 3-run homer. So they're trying to find a way to get him in the lineup. So if Bohm or Didi struggles, if they don't work out, we could see Bryson Stott rather quickly. Akil Baddoo hit a home run off of a lefty on Friday. Anytime he does anything against the lefty, I feel like that's noteworthy. So that's Akil Baddoo. And Jeremy Pena, Scott, someone we've talked about quite a bit recently. He's hit leadoff in the past 2 games that all of the starters were in the lineup for the Houston Astros. I don't to me, I can't really fathom the idea of Jeremy Pena leading off when you have as many bats as you do, but I think it's noteworthy. So look, if he's leading off in a lineup that includes Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez and all the great bats they have, there's going to be value there. So just something to pay attention to.
If he does. It may just be that, obviously spring training's different. And if you're batting at the top of the lineup, it's a chance to bat more. And they're trying to give him more at bats to evaluate him further. I don't know if I don't think I've seen anything from Dusty Baker talking about using it during the regular season or anything like that. But he has made some interesting lineup choices in the past. So something to keep an eye on.
All right, Scotty, let's get to some breakouts here. And where do you want to start?
Well, since we have so much time left, where are we? Okay, here we are. Let me just mention Dalton Varsho real quick because I already brought him up when I was talking about Mitch Garver. And yeah, like I said, everyday center fielder is the plan. So he'll have a bat advantage over most every catcher. He's the only catcher who runs a lot, at least in theory he does. Real Muto could get double-digit steals, but Varsho could approach 20, I think, potentially, especially if he's playing center field. And, he pretty much caught fire over the final 60 games or so. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but hit near 300 with an OPS of like 880 or something like that over his final 60-ish games. Looked like the guy we saw in the minors. So I think he's legit and he's catcher eligible. So that's a good thing.
The ADP for Dalton Varsho is 129. Scott, Wilson Contreras is going 6 picks ahead. Who would you rather have, Varsho or Contreras?
I would rather have I think Varsho. Yeah, Varsho.
How about Varsho versus Yasmani Grandal in a categories league?
Varsho in a categories league for sure. Grandal, with all the walks, I think you have to put him ahead in points.
All right, so a good bit of value there if you like Varsho over Grandal because he's going about 30 picks later in ADP right now. So
all right, I got the exact numbers here. It was basically what I said. Final 57 games last year, Varsho hit 294 with 10 homers and an 886 OPS.
All right. I wanted to mention a few starting pitchers as breakouts, guys that I've mentioned quite a bit already. Shane McClanahan throws mid to upper 90s, bunch of strikeout potential here. Had a 14.8% swinging strike rate last year. That was tied for 8th best among starters with at least 120 innings pitched last season. He does allow a lot of hard contact. I think the Rays are going to figure it out, whether it's sequencing or changing up the pitch mix just a little bit, maybe not throwing the fastball as much. But I have a lot of faith in the Rays figuring it out for Shane McClanahan, and they need him. They need some length out of him because their rotation is not great, and no Tyler Glasnow this year. So I think that they are going to rely heavily on Shane O'Mac. The other one, Logan Gilbert. He's been in the news. I mentioned last week. I'm getting irrationally excited about Logan Gilbert. Last year, the surface numbers, not great, 4.68 ERA, but the skill interactive ERA, the Sierra, was very good for him. The strikeout minus walk rate was tied for 26th with Joe Musgrove. That is among starting pitchers with at least 110 innings pitched from last season. He's got all the stuff. Like, everything is there. He just needs to put it all together. He's got a really hard fastball. He's big. He gets a lot of extension on that fastball. He's got good secondary pitches, Logan Gilbert does. So two pretty hyped up names here, Scott, in Shane McClanahan and Logan Gilbert. Do you find yourself drafting either one? And if so, which one of the two?
I haven't. I mean, Shane McClanahan's going about the same point. I'd look to draft Verlander or just move on from pitching altogether. I've had more opportunities to draft Gilbert and just haven't yet. But, you know, him going with a harder slider this year, you know, it was low 80s last year. It's high 80s now. And just the way he's looked this spring with the development of that pitch, it's starting to get excited about him too. Yeah. Logan Gilbert. Yeah. I might need to add him in Breakouts 2.0 or 3.0.
All right, Scott, I know you have a few starting pitchers here as well that you are excited about the breakout potential of Patrick Sandoval and Tony Gonsolin.
Yes. So Sandoval had a 15.3% swinging strike rate in the 14 starts that he made from May 17th on. That, if he had the innings to qualify, it would have been second only to Corbin Burns. So he was a huge bat mister. His changeup is unbelievable. It might be the best swing and miss pitch in the game. He's had some control issues, obviously had some health issues last year, shut down early with I think it was a lumbar, a stress fracture in his back or something like that. But supposed to be healthy now. I don't think he's made an official start yet, but we hear he's healthy and ton of strikeout potential. And I think there's a lot of upside there that's not being accounted for by his ADP. And then Tony Gonsolin. Yes, he looks like he's going to be in the Dodgers rotation after all. It wasn't so clear after they brought in Tyler Anderson. They brought in Tyler Anderson. It wasn't so clear Gonsolin was going to be in the rotation since he has a lot of experience in the bullpen as well. But Dave Roberts said over the weekend that Gonsolin is in line to be the fifth starter. And if you just look at his career numbers, that pretty much tells you why you should be excited. Because in his career now, 142 and a third innings, 285 ERA, 109 whip, 9.4 K per nine. The walk rate was way up last year. He had some health issues, but he came back in September. He looked sharp again. The swinging strike rate was up. And I think there's a potential for him to take off, especially with that Dodgers lineup backing him.
All right. Yeah. Patrick Sandoval. I know the ADP has been on the rise over the past week. That is 186 for Patrick Sandoval over at the NFBC. So lots of excitement there for Patrick Sandoval now climbing inside the top 200. And then Tony Gonsolin, the ADP for him is 283.4 over on Fantasy Pros. Scott, he's going right around Carlos Carrasco and Jesus Luzardo, names that we talked about earlier. Where does he rank among that group?
Oh, man. So I had been taking him behind Carrasco, but that's with questions about when there were questions about Gonsolin's role. I still think behind Carrasco. I'll put him right in between those two. Carrasco, Gonsolin, and then Luzardo. Wish I could get them all, though.
You might be able to. I mean, just because they're bunched up in ADP, I mean, those could be, the last three picks of your draft. Or
I missed out on a couple chances at Gonsolin last week for a good price. I just started to have second thoughts about whether or not he was really going to be in the Dodgers rotation, and I regret it now because I think he's good.
I think so too. Yeah, he just has to stay on the field. He's someone who's dealt with injuries, but if he can do that and get stretched out and they give him a real opportunity, great run support, great organization to pitch for, lots to like there for Tony Gonsolin, and lots to like for Oneil Cruz so far that we've seen in spring training. The guy, his power comes so easily. Oneil Cruz, and we've seen two really long home runs so far. He has the ability to steal bases. He's a physical freak. And Scott, I know that you've cited, he was among the league leaders in the minors last year in terms of average exit velocity. He's someone that typically hits the ball as hard as somebody like Aaron Judge, and he kind of appears like Aaron Judge. He's a 6'7" shortstop. Again, prospect in the Pirates organization. He's a shortstop by trade, but they're talking about playing him in the outfield. They want to find ways to get Oneil Cruz's bat in that lineup. And Scott, someone that we talked about earlier as well, like kind of jumping all over the place here, but two prospects, young players with lots of upside, Jo Adell as well. I mean, what Jo Adell has done so far in spring training, he hit another home run over the weekend. He's now 6 for 22 with 3 homers, 3 steals in spring training, lowered the strikeout rate tremendously last year. And he's someone who, the max exit velo looks really good for Jo Adell, sprint speed. So, the tools are there for both of these guys. Are they names that you typically target, Jo Adell and Oneil Cruz?
Yeah, they're both, they were both in Breakouts 2.0. It doesn't sound like Oneil Cruz is going to have a job on opening day. Nobody on the Pirates beat seems to give him much of a chance of that. And, it's mostly because the Pirates, what's their incentive to call him up? He hasn't had much time at AAA, so he could stand to have more, I guess, especially if they want to try him in the outfield. But he'll be up soon enough, and I think the upside is such that he's worth stashing away until that day comes. But at this point, I think I would prioritize like a Julio Rodriguez over Oneil Cruz when maybe I wasn't 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm. Scott, talk to me about this last name that you have on this list, and that's Willy Adames. You can argue that he already broke out, but he's just not really being treated like it in terms of ADP.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically it. He wasn't thought to be a great fantasy asset in when he was with the Rays, but turns out Tropicana Field's a terrible place to hit, and especially for him because you just look at his road numbers during his time with the Rays, 291 with an 858 OPS, which is very similar to the 285 with an 886 OPS he put up after joining the Brewers last May. That'll play. I mean, those numbers aren't going to be so different than what I imagine Carlos Correa is going to put up, and they may not be so different than what I think Xander Bogaerts is going to put up. So Willy Adames is somebody I love drafting in my starting shortstop well after those guys, especially Bogaerts, are off the board.
And I've noticed, Scott, just around the fantasy baseball industry in general, it seems like there's not that much optimism for Willy Adames. So I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken in that, but I feel like in other, expert drafts that I've done, and even like Tout Wars, I think I got Willy Adames for $6 or $7 in a 12-team head-to-head points salary cap draft. I got him as my middle infielder, and I'm okay. Yeah, totally fine getting Willy Adames for that cheap. Happy to do so. Let's talk about some busts here, Scott. We'll wrap up. We'll go for like another 10 minutes or so, and we'll just rattle off a few names here back and forth. But I know 2 players who have a lot of power and speed potential, Randy Arozarena and Jazz Chisholm, wind up on this list for you.
Yeah, Arozarena's, I mean, they're both players I'm just not going to draft probably, but Arozarena goes earlier, and he was one of the biggest overachievers according to StatCast last year. StatCast gave him an expected batting average of 220 and an expected slugging percentage of 366, which are obviously not good numbers. And I mean, it's reminiscent of what Kevin Biggio's expected stats looked like going into last season, and we see how that turned out for him. Now, Arozarena is pretty athletic, and he may be able to outperform them, but to the extent he did last year, I'm skeptical. And if he doesn't outperform them to the extent he did last year, do the Rays continue to use him as an everyday player? Because they don't use many players as everyday players. I think more than anything, he's just being elevated because he stole 20 bases last year, and people are so desperate to get base stealers that they end up kind of ignoring all the other aspects of their profile and the risk factors therein. But even those steals, I mean, he was 20 for 30 last year. So is that something we can necessarily pencil him in for again, that those 20 steals? I'm not sure about that. Jazz Chisholm, another player who I think, he steals bases, so let's give him a shot, is basically what people are thinking, because from May 1st on, he hit 236 with a 681 OPS. Got off to a really good start. Surprisingly, I think, because the way he looked in the minors, too many strikeouts. I thought he was going to get eaten alive by major league pitchers. He didn't in April, but he did from that point forward. And I think it's just as likely, especially like a 12-team context, that you drop him after 6 weeks than that. I think it's more likely actually that you drop him after 6 weeks than that he's like elevated his game and become this indispensable player for you.
Mm-hmm. And both have issues with splits too, Scott. And something I noticed with Arozarena last year, crushed lefties, but right-handed pitching, 257 batting average, 750 OPS. It's fine, it's adequate, but especially with an organization like Tampa Bay, where they find ways to get creative and get the most out of their players, it's something that could wind up being a factor for Arozarena. And Jazz Chisholm the other way against lefties, 237 batting average, 670 OPS. He's a really good defender. They're obviously the Marlins are not necessarily competing this year, so I don't know that they have as much incentive to take Jazz Chisholm out of the lineup ever. But it's overall it's going to affect his stat line there. Jazz Chisholm. For me, Scott, I have another outfielder who does provide power and speed, and I really don't have a great reason for this outside of just fading someone coming off of a career year, and that's Tyler Oneil. His ADP is 61.4. He's the 19th outfielder off the board. He's dealt with a ton of injuries in the past. The strikeout rate is massive. We're talking, over 30%. He impacts the ball so hard. So it's very reminiscent of what we saw from Aaron Judge earlier in Judge's career, where, he was able to make up for his strikeout rate because he hit the ball as hard as he did. But it's just a profile that scares me. And the fact that there's been as many injuries as there have for Tyler Oneil, as a borderline 5th, 6th round pick, it just seems like a big price tag. So I've been fading Tyler Oneil.
I hear you. And there haven't been that many players in the history of the game that have succeeded, that have delivered a respectable batting average with that kind of strikeout rate. So I haven't been particularly enthusiastic about drafting Tyler Oneil. I don't think I have yet. I haven't been willing to call him a bust because I can certainly, the expected stats are what they are. They pretty much back up what he did, even with all those strikeouts. And that's the effect of him hitting the ball that hard. So I'm mostly buying into it, but I hear what you're saying about Oneil. It's definitely a profile that I generally like to avoid.
All right, Scott. I know 2 outfielders that you also have here. Well, outfield eligible players going inside the top 120 picks that you've been fading: Jesse Winker and Ryan Mountcastle.
Yeah. So Jesse Winker, for his career, his OPS is about 100 points higher at home than on the road. And that home was Cincinnati, the most favorable park for home runs. And now he's going to Seattle on the opposite end of the spectrum. So you wonder how that's going to play, first of all. And the fact that his splits against lefties, 176 batting average, 572 OPS last year. Is that something a contender is going to be willing to accept every time against the lefty? Is he going to be able to hit 350 against righties again? If he has those to balance out those numbers against lefties and give us the kind of stat line we're looking for in fantasy. And I have my doubts about all of that. I have my doubts about the playing time given the platoon splits, the power given the park shift, and the batting average. I suspect it'll be good, but as good as last year, I don't know. So yeah, Winker worries me there. Mountcastle might be the clearest bust to me. And partly it's just, I don't know why people are drafting him as high as they do. He's going ahead of all the profit pocket at first base. At least he was. And you look at just what he did last year. The 33 home runs are really the only number that stands out. Like his entire profile is dependent on that. Bad lineup, doesn't get on base much, so the runs and RBI are not really in line with those 33 home runs. And I have a lot of doubts in him repeating those 33 home runs. I had doubts even before they decided to make those drastic changes to Camden Yards, pushing the fence back 30 feet in left field, turning it into maybe the worst park for right-handed hitters, the worst home run park. Even before that, I thought maybe he profiled realistically for more like 28, 29 homers. Now low 20s is all I'm giving him. And like I said, there's not going to be much to go with it. So definitely out on Mountcastle.
No, Scott, for the most part, I agree with you on both players, Jesse Winker and Ryan Mountcastle. I wonder if now people are going too far the other way with Jesse Winker. I did a draft earlier on Sunday night before this podcast, and I drafted Jesse Winker, something I have not done all offseason, in a 15-team league where I got him at pick 170. So his ADP right now is right around pick 100. But, I mean, if you're telling me he's dropping 70 spots now, then all right, I'm going to be interested if everyone is fading him that far. So outfielders that went ahead of him, Alex Verdugo, Hunter Renfroe, Dylan Carlson in this draft. To me, I mean, that's just a little bit too egregious. So
I was looking at ADP, how that would compare, and Verdugo and Carlson were the names that stood out. Yeah, I'd definitely rather have Winker than those two. Hunter Renfroe, that's a close call for me, and I've always been higher on Renfroe than the consensus.
All right. I had a starting pitcher that I wanted to mention here, and it's Blake Snell. I can't get behind Blake Snell. I know he had a stretch last year where he looked like maybe the best pitcher in baseball. It was an 8-start stretch from August through September where he basically just cut out the changeup and he went fastball, slider, and it was amazing. And it worked for him. I forgot. I was either listening or I was on a podcast recently where somebody mentioned they were watching Blake Snell on a Twitch stream. It might have either been the Welsh or Paul Sporer. And he was doing like a live Q&A and they asked him, are you going to ditch the changeup this upcoming season as well? Or are you just going fastball slider heavy again? And he said, nah, the changeup is coming back. Something like that, it just kind of worries me where like Blake Snell is going to be stubborn and he's going to try and, bring back this pitch. And look, he should just go with what worked, and that was the fastball slider. But I just worry that he's going to tinker again, and he has a lot of issues with control and command and durability, and he doesn't go deep into his starts. So I get it. He used to have some of the best upside in the game. He still gets a lot of strikeouts. But Scott, I mean, to me, there's just so much playing against Blake Snell that I just never wind up drafting him where he's going.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help that it sounds like he's behind and may not be ready to go the first time through the rotation. So that just it's just another risk factor stacked on top for him. So I get it. I don't think the price for him is so bad compared to where it's been in recent years. And he did show us that upside again late in the year. So I've taken him on occasion, but I hope not to. Like I hope to get, like, if I'm looking to make up ground and strikeouts, I hope to get like Yu Darvish instead before I have to resort to Snell.
The ADP for Blake Snell is 112.6. So you're right, Scott. I mean, recent seasons, he was a 3rd or 4th round pick in 12-team leagues. I would take Shane McClanahan, who's going basically, right next to him. Justin Verlander is going around him. Much rather have Verlander. And Pablo Lopez is someone that's going after Blake Snell. He's going about 20 picks later. I would rather just have Pablo Lopez straight up than Blake Snell this upcoming season.
Yeah, I do like Lopez a lot. Yeah.
All right, Scott, let's wrap up here with one more pitcher. You mentioned risk with Blake Snell, and perhaps no riskier starting pitcher right now than Zach Gallen.
Yeah, I'm surprised there still seems to be some enthusiasm for him. Obviously not like in past years, but to me, he's just untouchable because he was, even before the shoulder bursitis, he showed up to spring training with that. And, that puts his immediate future in doubt. But I think he's going to need Tommy John based on the way his elbow sprain played out last year, where he did not look as effective after returning from it. And I've seen that pattern enough times to know what it means. Pitcher has an elbow injury that doesn't sound so bad, but then he just doesn't look right after returning. And usually that's how it ends, is with Tommy John surgery. So I am not touching Zach Gallen.
All right. The ADP on Fantasy Pros, which is a culmination of a bunch of different sources, has Zach Gallen at pick 148. But over the past week at the NFBC, he is dropping. So 185.6 is the ADP. He's going around names like Tarek Skubal, Patrick Sandoval, Adam Wainwright. Scott, I have to assume you'd rather have Wainwright and Sandoval over him. Right?
Yeah, that's and who was the third name you mentioned?
Tarek Skubal.
Oh, one of these names is not like the others.
Yeah.
I don't know how those three pitchers end up going in the same range, but okay.
All right. So keep on falling. We've got to drop a Zach Allen even more than that. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.